Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another of our Atelier Artworks online lectures. Before we begin, I should like to give you some information about the Atelier at Flowerfield, a 501(c)(3) not-for-profit organization. Our Spring 1 session will begin on March 27th, so that's the week after next. And classes are now open for registration. You can register online at on our website, atelierflowerfield.org. Or if you wish, you can call us up 631-250-9009. We offer a variety of fine art drawing and painting classes in a variety of different mediums, both online and in studio. We also offer classes in illustration, digital illustration, and have created a group of portfolio prep programs for high school students wishing to go to college to study art. So we'll help you prepare your portfolio. Again, information can be found on our website. In addition, we have a number of paintings and prints for sale, both in the gallery and on our online store. And our current exhibition is our second annual middle and high school student artists invitational juried show. And that will continue on until March 30th. I urge people to come and have a look at it. We've had a number of wonderful pieces of artwork on display. The young people do a great job. The next show will be a solo show by artist Kirk Larson called Wow, You've Got to See This. The opening reception will be on April 13th from 5:30 to 7:30. All are welcome. And the gallery is open 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday. Tonight, photographer Carlos Morales is presenting a lecture about the Mexican muralist Siqueiros. And it's titled Siqueiros in New York, the 1936 Experimental Workshop. We welcome him this evening and hope you enjoy tonight's lecture. If you wish to ask questions, please post them in the chat room and we will answer them after the lecture. I shall now hand over to Carlos.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today's talk is going to be about a research paper I have been working on for about a year now about David Alfaro Siqueiros and the time he spent in New York, specifically during the year of 1936. Which is the year when he created this experimental workshop. But in order to understand what Siqueiros was doing in New York, it is important to go back and acknowledge what he was doing in other places that led him to create this workshop in New York in 1936. So now I'm gonna share my screen. So first, I would like to begin by saying why this research is so important to me. As a Mexican visual artist living and working in New York, I have faced many challenges, and being away from home for over 25 years has made me question my own identity, but it also has led me to become extremely interested in learning about the experiences of other Mexican artists, such as Siqueiros, who came to this country long before me and explored and learned more about their legacies that they left behind. In moments when I lacked inspiration, I found myself pursuing them in the spaces I now inhabit. Locating them here inspired me to develop work such as La Ruta, 2019 photographic photo essay and video montage that I created focused on the mundane routine of commuters in New York, which connected me to Jose Clemente Orozco through his painting titled The Subway in 1928. And turning to my cultural predecessors, I have found in stimulation to experiment with different visual mediums, and in the process, I also began to question how their experiences as immigrants and artists from Mexico linked to my own experience. And as you can see here is the painting that inspired me to begin this research. And it's a painting by Jose Clemente Orozco he created titled The Subway in 1928. And the images on the right that you see are part of the photo essay that I created titled La Ruta, which were inspired on this particular painting by Clemente Orozco. I would like to briefly now talk about who Siqueiros was for any of you who are not familiar with his work. David Alfaro Siqueiros was a Mexican social painter. He is well known for his large public mural using the latest in equipment, materials, and also techniques. His work reflected his Marxist ideology, and he is well known as one of the three great Mexican muralists, along with, of course, Jose Clemente Orozco and Diego Rivera. And you can see here Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros on the right. And on the left, you can see Siqueiros in prison in Mexico City in, I believe it's 1966. Siqueiros produced thousands of square feet of wall paintings in which numerous social, political, and industrial changes were portrayed from his left-wing perspective. The first time I recall seeing a painting by David Alfaro Siqueiros is when I was about 12 years old. I was standing at the Forum in Mexico City, which is a cultural center that was designed and decorated by Siqueiros during the 1960s. As all of you can see, this is the building right here. And the reason why this mural is so important is because the experimental techniques he used on these murals, which will take us back to what he was doing in New York, also in places like Argentina and LA. One of the things as a small boy that grabbed my attention the most about this mural was actually the structure on which the mural had been created, because it felt as if the painting itself was coming out of the wall. Its dimensionality, proportions, lines, and vibrant colors all made me feel as if I myself could become part of La Marcha de la Humanidad en la Tierra y hacia el Cosmos, which is the title of this mural. Siqueiros worked on this mural from 1965 to 1971 when it was completed. As all of you can see, the shape of the building is quite unique, and the mural is painted with acrylic paint and airbrush, which is something as I mentioned before, Siqueiros had already experimented with on prior murals. He had already used the same technique in a mural he had done in Argentina, as well as two of the three murals he created in California. Some of the work he produced in New York and some of the work he produced in New York. For this particular mural, he also created several paintings on sheets of metal. Then he incorporated those sheets of metal onto the wall, and he called that technique escultopinturas or esculto paintings. These escultopinturas are very important because they stand out the most in the work, since the combination of colors gives effects of light and shadow, but it also reflects sunlight, giving the mural quite a powerful feeling. The two images you see on the right are part of another mural he did on the inside of the building. And I can say that without a doubt, for me, this was an early introduction to Siqueiros' work and a very powerful experience. So I want to talk a little bit about why I became interested in Siqueiros. As I mentioned before, the first time I saw one of his murals was when I was 12 years old, and it was not until many years later that I came upon another of Siqueiros' paintings while I was visiting MoMA in New York City. This painting is titled Collective Suicide. And this painting really resonated with me because it speaks to the strong ideas of Siqueiros. After seeing this painting, I began more interested in Siqueiros' work. And once I learned about the workshop he created in 1936 on 14th Street in New York City, along with some of his close friends in Union Square, known as el Laboratorio de Artes Modernas, I became more intrigued. And as you can see, the painting that he created, and the painting I'm talking about is this one on the right, is called Collective Suicide, is at MoMA, and is a painting that we're gonna go back to later on, because it's a very important painting, and then I'll be talking about it specifically about the technique he used on this painting. The images that you see on the right are three of the murals that he created while his time in California, and they're also important because that's where he began experimenting with some of the techniques that he later was gonna teach at the famous workshop in 1936. And I believe that for Siqueiros, revolutionary ideas require revolutionary techniques as well as materials. And to me, this painting is a great example of that collective suicide. Siqueiros argued that you simply could not make work of political art in the modern era using the same techniques that had been used for religious practitioners in the 13th century. As one of those revolutionary methods he used on this particular painting was the use of the spray gun, which was unheard of at the time. Prior to this, as I had mentioned before, during his first visit to the US in 1932, Siqueiros went to Los Angeles to avoid legal issues in Mexico and to explore opportunities in the United States. His initial assignment was at the Cunard School of Art, where he taught a class on fresco painting. And this gave him a great opportunity to execute these ideas and to experiment with the use of the spray gun. On the two of the three murals that he created during his time in California, America Tropical, Meeting Obrero, Here you can see actually Siqueiros using the spray gun for the first time at the Cunard School of Art in California. And this is important to mention because both of these murals were destroyed after Siqueiros was deported from the United States due to his political views and the strong political content of these two murals. After him being deported, Siqueiros embarked to Uruguay and then finally to Argentina, where once again he kept experimenting and incorporating new methods and ideas. One of those experiments and new tools he added was the use of the projectors and also the photography. When I learned that Siqueiros was experimenting with projectors and photography, I became deeply interested, and I began to do research about the work that he was creating in Argentina, where he used these techniques. In Argentina, he created this mural titled Ejército Plástico. Again, he used new methods by using, once again, the spray gun as he had done priorly, but also he incorporated the use of projectors, as well as the use of industrial paint. And this is very important. He used paint that was used to use airplanes at the time, as well as homes. And he also used a movie projector, allowing him and his team to study the distortion of the curved surface in a more accurate way. The use of these materials and techniques he had already been using for some period of time and had given him great results were some of the same techniques that he introduced in New York at the Siqueiros workshop in 1936. Siqueiros then returned to New York in 1936, when he, along with José Clemente Orozco, another of the great Mexican muralists, served as an official delegate at la Asamblea Nacional de Productores de Artes Plásticas at the First American Artists Congress, where they gathered to discuss the fight against fascism. As he had done previously in other places, such as in California, Uruguay, and Argentina, Siqueiros began to immediately organize artists, having worked with the painter Harold Lehman previously in California. Lehman became an important figure among his associates, as well as the development of the workshop. A short time after the creation of the workshop, Siqueiros published what is known as the New York Manifesto, which is a collection of ideas and principles. And as you can see here, some of those ideas. So the methodology of the workshop and the laboratory was based on 6 principles, as he called them: experimentation, research of technical aspects of art, studying the relationship between classical and modern techniques of art, creation and the corresponding effects, development of new art production techniques, appropriate them to modern times, producing public forms of works of art that are understandable and accessible to the general public, and working and studying collectively in an environment without hierarchy. The mission of the workshop was to teach anti-fascist artists about radical new methods and materials. This is what he later will meet Jackson Pollock, who was a student of Siqueiros and were, according to Harold Lehman, a key figure, as well as a member of the workshop, is where Jackson Pollock adopted the dripping technique, for which he is well known. The workshop was formed by 12 to 15 artists who worked collectively to produce functional art meant to be used for labor and political organizations, including paintings, posters for rallies, and floats for parades. And these are some of the paintings that he created during that workshop. On the left, you can see 2 of the paintings that he created during that workshop. And on the right, there's actually a picture of Jackson Pollock, Siqueiros, and the image that you see here in figure 26 is, you can actually see Jackson Pollock at the bottom of the floor that they were creating. And at the end of this talk, I will show this video that I found during my research. This is the floor that they created. And you can actually see, it moving. So at the end of my talk, I will show you so you can actually see it. As described on Harold Lehman's website, The Story of an American Artist, Lehman recruited many American artists, including Jackson Pollock, while Siqueiros brought artists from Mexico and South America. The purpose was to do experimental large-scale work using industrial tools and materials. Specifically, no oil paint or canvas was to be used. Automotive enamels and lacquers on wood panels was their medium, since experimenting with these materials and techniques was a crucial component of the workshop. It is important to pause and note that the drip technique so commonly associated with Jackson Pollock, who was also a participant in the workshop, was first conceived here. According to the transcript of Lehman's 1997 interview with Stephen Porcari for the Archives of American Art, Lehman recalls, and I quote, "We got a fully supply of nitro Valspar auto paint and brought them back to the shop. The first thing that we did was to puncture holes. We didn't open them up. We punctured holes in the lid, punctured holes in all of them. And then we started dribbling the paint onto big 8x12 feet plywood panels on the floor, referring more specifically to dribbling the colors. Lehman continued to explain how and why it happened while confronting the notion that it wasn't an innovation. Siqueiros had already experience of using some of this stuff, and he saw the possibilities throughout the pouring of the paint. Lehman goes on to explain that as the paint dissolves, the paint will create completely new structures, forms, and the paint itself will take the shapes that were recognizable, realistic shapes, as in the painting of a collective suicide, which is this painting that I mentioned before. Lehman is making reference to the painting, to this painting here. And according to him, they did this and all the work they created during the workshop. And I quote again, Pollock was in on that. He saw that, he did that. There's no question that that's where he got the whole idea of dripping the paint. He soon created a system of control. Siqueiros soon created a system of control accidents, which he used this in a series of small panel paintings such as Cosmos and Disaster, 1936. And beyond doubt or argument, that's the real foundation and basis of where Jackson Pollock got this idea of dripping paint. It was by Siqueiros during this experimental workshop. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Harold Lehman's work, but I found that this is an image of Harold Lehman later in life. And this is an image of the participants of the workshop in 1936. And you can all see Siqueiros there in the middle. And I wanted to talk about Harold Lehman and include him in this research because I think he's extremely important, because he had already worked with Siqueiros and the murals in California, but he also was an important part of the workshop because he recruited a lot of the participants that were part of this workshop, among them Harold Lehman and others. And I also wanted to mention that in retracing Siqueiros' steps to New York, throughout Lehman, it was quite striking to find out that Siqueiros, like myself, encountered other challenges that immigrants too often face. And as Lehman thought back to the first days of the workshop, he recalls how the building where the workshop was going to take place on West 14th Street was denied to Siqueiros because he was Mexican. When the owner refused to rent the space to Siqueiros, Lehman then put his own name on the list so they could move forward with the work. And I think that's a very important part of information, because I think when I was doing research and reading about the workshop, there's a lot of references to Siqueiros and Jackson Pollock, but not too many references to Harold Lehman. And I think the fact that he was able to lease the building so that the workshop could take place is extremely important. And without him, none of this probably would have happened. So I wanted to mention that. For Siqueiros, the modern human beings was shaped by his experiences in the industrialized world, as well as the technical advancements that had revolutionized his reality. Believing that all artistic expressions should respond to the new mentality that prevailed at the time in the industrialized world. And I quote, Harold Lehman recalls that as part of his reality, the opportunity to create something completely different and new, this came about in the flow they both created for the 1936 May Day Parade in New York City, commissioned by the U.S. Communist Party. Siqueiros described the group's first collective production as an essay of monumental sculpture and motion. And as I shown before, this is the actual float. And as you can see, the result of that was work that was being done at a really large scale. This was the first of several pieces being produced at this workshop. And as you can see, most of the work that was produced here was really, really big, experimental, and very experimental. The collective produced additionally floats carrying messages with similar motifs to the masses from the bloody red paint handprints, symbolizing the suffering of the people at the hands of fascism, which was the case in the float commissioned by the American League Against War and Fascism in 1936. And that's a different float, and I don't have an image of that. I've been searching for an image of that particular float, and I haven't been able to find one. To me, it's quite evident that Siqueiros' workshop was at the time when his work really became political functional and even more experimental than the murals that he had already done in Argentina, LA, and Uruguay. As I mentioned before, I'm in the very early stages of this research. After visiting with his friends that were on their way to Spain, Siqueiros joined their struggle against Franco, and Siqueiros was asked to bring the workshop to Spain. So then he left New York with several other Mexican artists to do so. Upon their arrival, however, it became clear that it was not possible. So after lecturing in Valencia on art as a tool of struggle, Siqueiros joined the 5th Regiment to volunteer as a soldier in the same month. In that same month, Siqueiros left New York to go to Spain. And then later on, he wrote a letter to his comrades or compadres, as he called them, specifically addressing Jackson Pollock and his brother, as well as Harold Lehman. And this is the letter that he wrote in December of 1936. And this letter, he expressed concern about a misunderstanding related to the provisional closing of the workshop, describing himself as being at more unrest with the problems of form and art than ever. This same letter also mentions his upcoming departure from New York. The image that you see on the left is the actual building where the workshop took place. As part of my research, one of the things that I've done is locate all these places, and I've been going there and photographing these places. I now am in the process of seeing if I can gain access to the building so I can go inside and actually photograph the space and to show this is where he worked, this is where the workshop took place, and this is actually an image of that technique that I was talking about, which is the dripping technique being used today. So I thought that was really interesting for me because I've seen tons of videos on social media of people working with this technique, and it's actually the dripping technique that Siqueiros created during this 1936 workshop. So these are examples of this technique being used nowadays. As all of you can see, I'm still in the early stages of this research, but the work continues. And I just wanted to say that in retracing Siqueiros' steps from Mexico to the United States with Uruguay and Argentina in between, I have moved from my first encounter with him at the Pollock Forum in Mexico City to his studio in New York. And as a spectator of a different sort, my investigation has led me to an artist who I greatly admire for his dedication to organizing artists, advocating for workers, and his commitment to artistic experimentation. And also all the risks that he took in all of these levels confirms to me his critical role in bringing together art and politics for those of us who seek to produce such work. I believe that in following his steps here in New York, I have found myself inspired to bring life to a previously conceived photo essay, documented immigrants that are both laborers and artists by experimenting further with methods and materials like Siqueiros, and that is to say, the shovel, the hammer, the worker, and the camera. All of these elements will bring together in a new way that ongoing reality of the artista obrero. And that's it. I wanted to make this presentation sort of short because I'm still in the early stages of the research. So I would like to know if anybody has questions. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? If you do, please put them in the chat room, and Carlos
Before the questions, I would like to actually show the video that I was talking about of the
oh yes, please go ahead. Yes.
So this is the only, I've been doing a lot of research about it, and hopefully I will be able to find more footage, but this is the actual footage of that float that Harold Lehman and Jackson Pollock and Siqueiros created together. And it's very short, but here you can actually see the float moving. So I thought this was quite an interesting piece because you can actually see the float, the way it worked. So I'm trying to see if I can find more footage of that specific event, and so far I haven't been able to do so, but I will continue looking. Yeah, and I would also like to mention that the fact that I haven't included a lot about Jackson Pollock and Siqueiros is because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I have read so many articles that have wrong information about the relationship between Jackson Pollock and Siqueiros, and it has really been a lot of work trying to find the accurate information. But the research continues, and when I'm done with this research, I'm planning to create an augmented reality project in which people will have actual access to see the spaces on their phone. So I will create a map of all these locations where everything took place, and then hopefully people will be able to go on this app and like gain accurate information about what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. So
I have a question actually. With the 1936 workshop, did it include any of the other, Diego Rivera or Orozco, or was it just Siqueiros that was running the workshop?
It was just Siqueiros that was running the workshop, and when he came to New York after being deported, he had already been to the U.S. prior to 1936, and that's when he was creating these murals in California. Then he was deported, and he came back in 1936. But he decided that he was going to create these workshops. He had already been trying to come to New York when he was in California to create a workshop, but then he was deported. He wasn't able to do that. So when he came back the second time, he saw this as an opportunity to do this workshop, and with the help of Harold Lehman, who was extremely important and extremely an important part of this, he was able to do so.
So was it Lehman who actually was able to arrange for the workshop to take place?
Yes, because he's the actual person that was able to sign the lease to get access to the space, since Siqueiros was denied to rent the space because he was Mexican.
And were the people who participated, were they specifically invited, or was it something that anyone who wanted to join could do?
It was, so the way it worked is Siqueiros invited artists from Latin America. He was bringing different artists, and Harold Lehman was actually recruiting people here in the United States.
So it was a mixture of.
Yeah. And that's and Harold Lehman is the one that actually recruited Jackson Pollock. And it's also important to mention that Jackson Pollock was a big follower of Mexican muralists. He was in California. His brother, Jackson Pollock's brother, actually worked with Siqueiros on 2 of the murals that he created in California. So he was very familiar with what Siqueiros was doing. And I also wanted to mention, this is going to be, Siqueiros is one of the artists that I'm focusing on right now, but this research that I'm working on is actually I will be covering 3 different artists. One of them is going to be Siqueiros, Rivera, and Siqueiros and Rivera, but there's actually going to be 3 different Mexican artists that I'll be doing research on. And at the end, I'll be talking about how they influence the American art world. So to me, it's really important that as a Mexican artist, when you go to school here, there's always references to to European artists and, like their role in the arts, but I never felt like I was, that I had like a role model from my own country, from Latin America. It was always like, every time we talk about art at school, it was like either European or American. And to me, when I found out about this workshop and the influence that had on people like Jackson Pollock, it was like, okay, this is something I can relate to. I want to know more. And that's why this research started. And it's just, I'm in the early stages, but I'm hoping to continue and, hopefully write a big paper. And the other artist that I was talking about was Rufino Tamayo, which is also somebody that lived in New York and worked in New York for many years, and there's very little known about him.
Was Tamayo was also associated with the other Mexican muralist, wasn't he?
Yes, yes.
Right.
And he was also a professor. He worked as a professor here in the US.
Right. Looks like there are no more questions. So we'd like to thank Carlos for presenting such an interesting lecture. We hope you found it both engaging and informative. Our next lecture will be on April 6th and will be given by Kirk Larson, and it'll be an introduction to his show. Wow, you've got to see this. So he'll be talking about his own work and his own life experiences. And I should also like to remind you that we have a couple of workshops coming up. We have a gouache workshop taught by Beth Drucker. That's this Saturday. There's actually still time to sign up if anyone's interested. You can do so online, or you can call us at 631-250-9009. And then next week, our own instructor, Randall Di Giuseppe, is going to be giving a workshop on how to draw with silver point, which is a method that was used in the past by many artists. It's very interesting because you're actually using a pen made of real silver. So that's going to be a week from Saturday. And again, there's still time to sign up for that. And then in addition, just a reminder that we'll be hosting our second paint night event on March 31st. That's going to be hosted by Randall. So if anyone is interested in signing up, that is also online. And again, you can also call us. Please look out for our emails about our lectures, exhibitions, and other upcoming events and classes. And again, I'd like to thank Carlos and thank everyone for joining us, and good night.